kind of lessons were you learning from your mother? Because again, a lot of this has happened before she really became the activist that we all think of now.
I think they were political, but we didn't know they really were. And I specifically remember sitting at the kitchen table. I was in elementary school, or maybe 7th grade, junior high school was called then. But I remember talking about the civil rights movement. I remember talking about how blacks were, and mom she was an avid newspaper reader, and still is, but she would bring up, gee, you know, this is what's happening, and I guess I just heard what her concerns were, and that was of what was going on in our country, and the world too, but at that time it was in the 60s. And I remember talking specifically about Dr. Martin Luther King, and about the nonviolent marches that were going on. The Vietnam War was escalating. We talked about that, and you couldn't get away from it because on TV, I just remember the body bags coming back from Vietnam, and how every day we would see on the news these black plastic bags coming back with the bodies of these young men. So that was happening, and I think that's where it was out of our control. It was just happening at that particular time, which, because mom is the way she is, she has that fire also, and that need to correct or to do something to make things, to stand up and make things right if it's possible. I mean, it wasn't because she was a political science graduate or anything. It was just because she had that personal fire that we talked about that over the dinner table.
So you grew up in a very political time with a mother who was very sensitive to that. What did you know about being Japanese American? What did being Japanese American mean to you as a person who grew up on the East Coast at that time during the Civil Rights Movement and anti-war
Being
movement?
Japanese American, up to the time, well, I'll tell you one thing that sticks out in my mind that I don't feel good about at all, but it was how I was feeling. I remember in 5th grade, we had just moved to a new neighborhood, and in my class, there was a Chinese boy. His name was Kenny Wong. But the reason why I remember it is because he and our family, I have a brother also, which I have to make clear, but we had more siblings. But I remember trying to avoid him. I did not grow up at all with identifying with being Japanese. What being Japanese American was getting together on, I guess New Year's was the main thing. My grandmother would come over. She lived with an auntie. She'd come over about 2 or 3 days ahead of time, stay with us for 3 days and cook the Oshogatsu New Year's food. That, I think, still is probably the deepest connection I have to being Japanese American. And it was wonderful to have that positive connection, because there was a lot of non-positive feedback I was getting, and I didn't know that was why I rejected identifying with anything Japanese. Was like, oh, you know, Japanese, like, it just was so negative. Like, growing up, we grew up with being called Ching Chong, China You know, I mean, that was just an everyday occurrence, going to school. There just weren't very many Japanese Americans around. There were not that many Asian Americans in the upper northern part of Manhattan where I grew up. So really, really a minority.
Clearly, it's a different time, and for you, definitely a different place, being in the East Coast. How did your understanding of being Japanese Americans change?
Well, I have to say, it was a very gradual thing. I didn't realize I was rejecting my classmate, Kenny Wong. I didn't know that why I was avoiding being seen anywhere near him. If he was on my side of the street, I'd go to the other side of the street. I didn't know why. I just knew I had this feeling of repulsion, and not knowing that I'm repulsed by my own identity, which I had not accepted or recognized. Growing up in junior high school, of course, being a girl, didn't know what I was getting into makeup. I had this gorgeous sister who is an actress, and I wanted to be like her, and I would try and make a crease in my eyelids by using the glue for putting eyelashes on and making a double crease, and I think I've ruined my face because of it, but that was, I guess, is the negative sense of the denial. So one very clear thing that happened to me, and it happened unconsciously, was I was doing a little modeling and trying to follow in my sister's footsteps, and I went up for a commercial for Jergens hand lotion. I was 17, and they had 5-6 of us in the running for this commercial, and we were to be Eskimo women, and they were going to put us on a lake, a frozen lake, and have a helicopter come down with offering us Jergens hand lotion and saying it works for them. So imagine what it could do for you. And but what happened was in these auditions they talk about you like you're there and you're trying to look everything that they want you to look like. You know, they want you to look young, you want to look young. They want you to look mature, you want to look mature. So, you know, you just don't know. You're just in their hands. And these two people were saying, well, I think she'll do it. You know, they were giving me feedback. And I, somehow in my mind, I just asked, well, have you interviewed any, I mean, don't ask me why I asked this question. Have you interviewed any Eskimo women? And they looked at me like I was totally nuts. And they well, no, I mean, their faces are, it's kind of broad and, you know, and that really, had changed. I don't know what made me change, honestly. I think it had to do with those conversations at the dinner table. Honestly, I do. It gave me a conscience and about how people are treated for either because of their economic status or their physical. It just made sense to me that they're here, I'm playing an Eskimo woman, and they're not taking the real thing and say, you know, it just seemed like a total lie. So that was one at 17, I think I was about 17.